It was the morning of the Lunar New Year. A sharp, piercing siren tore through the blue-tinged darkness of the sleeping country village. The frantic barking of dogs and the flashing lights of an ambulance turned the once peaceful courtyard of the traditional home into a scene of pure chaos. Amid the acrid smell of gas, paramedics rushed a man and a woman, both foaming at the mouth, out of the guest house. But while screams and frantic footsteps filled the air, Hee-ju sat on the porch of the main house, as still and silent as a statue. In her hand was a small knife, and the skin of a red apple peeled away in one long, unbroken curl. Scrape. Scrape the rhythmic sound of the blade against the fruit was the only thing she seemed to hear. As the red emergency lights washed over her expressionless face like waves of blood, you could see the dark, greasy soot lodged deep under her fingernails, a faint but damning trace of the night before. Our story begins 3 days before this terrible catastrophe. The kitchen of the country home ahead of the holiday was nothing short of a war zone. White smoke billowed from pots of boiling oil, and the floor was slick with grease. Hee-ju, ignoring the pain that felt like a knife in her lower back, was dredging endless piles of fish fillets and flour. For 20 years, long enough for mountains to erode, she had silently performed this ritual in this small, damp kitchen. Her face shone with sweat and oil in the suffocating heat, her old floral apron stained with the ghosts of holidays past. She could hear her in-laws' laughter from the living room, but the only sounds that ever crossed the threshold for her were sharp commands, bring water, or cut some fruit. And that's when it happened. The front door flew open, and with a blast of cold winter air came the heavy scent of Chanel perfume, instantly overpowering the smell of grease. It was the second daughter-in-law, Ura. Her entrance was, as always, a spectacle. A shimmering mink coat, hands dripping with shopping bags from the city's most expensive department store. Ura looked down at Hee-ju, who was crouched on the floor cooking, and wrinkled her nose as if she'd seen something vile. Tossing the bags onto the table, she sighed. Sister, who in the world still makes all this food at home? Just buy it. Why make the whole house stink like this? It wasn't a suggestion. It was a judgment, a blatant mockery of Hee-ju's labor, and a bitter announcement of her own superiority. The mother-in-law's reaction was even more grotesque. The old woman, who hadn't even glanced at the mountain of food Hee-ju had spent all day preparing, beamed like a child at the thick envelope of cash Ura handed her. Oh, my darling second daughter-in-law, you're here. Your hands are so cold. Come, let's go into the warm master bedroom. She whisked Ura away, leaving Hee-ju utterly alone with the cooling food and the sight of her own husband slumped back as he went outside to smoke, enviously eyeing his younger brother's luxury car. Hee-ju wiped her greasy hands on her apron and bit her lip until it bled. She had been the one to care for her in-laws through sickness and health, cleaning up after them for a lifetime. But the praise, and the love, was always reserved for the sister-in-law who showed up twice a year with an envelope full of cash. The conflict finally erupted at the dinner table. Her father-in-law, drunk and belligerent, slammed his spoon down and made a declaration that changed everything. I've decided to sell the ancestral lands and this house. I'm giving all the money to my second son to fund his new business. The liquor glass in Hee-ju's husband's hand trembled. Father, what are you saying? I am the eldest son. But his trembling protest was immediately shot down by his younger brother's sneer. Brother, are you capable of taking care of this family? All you have is debt. Just stay out of it, we'll handle things. Ura, elegantly swirling a glass of wine, chimed in. He's right, brother-in-law. Honestly, you two say you're caring for mother and father, but aren't you just freeloading? We'll take much better care of them. Don't be so greedy. Hee-ju couldn't say a word. Freeloading. That's what they were. Parasites. A hot rage swelled in her chest, but as always, she swallowed it down. It was later, as she stood over the sink piled high with dirty dishes, that she heard Ura's voice from the yard, talking on her phone. The words, carried on the cold night air, were terrifyingly clear. "Oh, Mom, of course. As soon as the old fools transfer the money, I'm shoving them in a nursing home. Then we'll tear down this stinking house and build a vacation villa." My sister-in-law? Ugh, why would I care about those leeches? I don't give a damn if they end up on the street. At that moment, the sponge in Hiju's hand stopped moving. She heard a sound in her head, the clean, sharp snap of the last thread of her sanity, stretched taut for 20 long years, finally breaking. It was the next afternoon. Ura was complaining that the room in the guest house was freezing. "Ugh, sister. Come look at this boiler. I've turned the temperature all the way up, but it's still an icebox. Go put some more oil in it." At Ura's sharp command, Hiju went outside without a word. The boiler room behind the guest house was old and dilapidated. When she opened the door, the acrid smell of oil hit her as the ancient boiler rattled, sounding like it was on its last legs. As she went to check the oil tank, her gaze drifted to the exhaust pipe. She saw that the joint, corroded with age, was shaking precariously, as if it could fall apart at any moment. A faint, gray smoke was leaking from it. It was the smell of death. Hiju opened the toolbox and took out a wrench. She should have tightened it. That was the decent, human thing to do. But her hand, gripping the cold steel, wouldn't move. Ura's phone call, the years of contempt, her own wasted life, it all flashed before her eyes. If she did nothing, she and her husband would be thrown out with the trash by tomorrow. Hiju's eyes went cold and hard. The wrench moved toward the bolt on the pipe. But instead of turning it clockwise to tighten it, she twisted it counterclockwise. Just a fraction. A tiny, imperceptible turn. With a sickening squeal of metal, the gap in the pipe widened just enough, a flaw so small, no one would ever notice. But she didn't stop there. From a corner of the shed, she took a roll of old duct tape. She began to meticulously seal the cracks around the guesthouse windows. Thoroughly. Perfectly. So that not a single whisper of fresh air could get in. Ura saw her as she passed through the yard. "What are you doing, sister?" Hiju turned, her face adorned with a smile that was warmer and kinder than any she had ever given before. "Oh, sister-in-law. I'm just sealing the cracks so you don't feel any drafts. I want you to be warm and comfortable tonight." Ura smirked. "Well, that's sweet of you, I guess. Thanks." Humming a little tune, Ura went inside, completely unaware that she was watching the final nail being hammered into her own coffin. Night fell, deep and black. The sound of laughter from the guest house eventually faded into silence. Hiju lay in her own bed in the main house, but she couldn't sleep. Straining her ears, she could hear the distant hum of the boiler. Asterisk whir. Where asterisk it sounded like a great beast breathing, and the mechanical sound hammered against her heart all night long. Was it the sound of guilt? Or was it the fanfare of her own liberation? As the hours crept by, the guest house sank into a heavy, profound silence. Hiju pulled the blankets over her head, but the humming sound seemed to vibrate in her very bones. She stared at the ceiling with wide-open eyes until the dawn. And now, we are back in the present. After the ambulance left, the police surveyed the scene. Looking over the old boiler room, an officer shook his head. "TSK, looks like the exhaust pipe just rusted through and fell off. We see these kinds of accidents a lot in old country houses in the winter. And they sealed the windows so tightly there was no ventilation at all. It's a clear-cut accidental death." Hiju nodded at the officer's words, dabbing at the tears welling in her eyes. "I should have checked it more carefully. It's all my fault." Her voice trembled so convincingly that the officer comforted her. "No, ma'am. It's the fault of an old house. Don't blame yourself." Her husband was crumpled in a corner of the yard, sobbing uncontrollably. But the tears on Heeju's cheeks ran their course and turned cold at the tip of her chin. The funeral was handled swiftly. With Ura and her husband gone, the inheritance rights naturally reverted to the eldest son, to Heeju's husband. Her in-laws were bedridden with shock, so Heeju managed every detail of the funeral. The mourners, seeing her in her black mourning clothes, whispered among themselves, "Oh, that poor woman. The eldest daughter-in-law suffers so much. How heartbroken she must be. She's a saint, that one." Heeju accepted their condolences with silent, respectful bows. Her face was a perfect mask of grief, but the expression hidden deep inside her was impossible for anyone to read. On the last night of the funeral, Heeju went into the restroom. The face in the mirror looked 10 years older than it had a few days ago. She opened her handbag and took out a small object she had recovered from the scene of the accident, Ura's bright red lipstick. She twisted the tube. The seductive crimson shone under the harsh fluorescent lights. With a trembling hand, she slowly applied the color to her own dry, cracked lips. Once. Twice. As the red filled them in, a bizarre, predatory life began to bloom on her tired face. Heeju stared intently at her reflection. The luxury items Ura flaunted, the family fortune, it was all hers now. She tried to raise the corners of her mouth into a smile. The woman in the mirror looked as if she was both laughing and crying at the same time. Her crimson lips looked like the mouth of a predator that had just devoured its prey. Just then, she heard it again, like a phantom in her ear. Asterisk were asterisk the sound of the boiler. The deathly lullaby that had filled the guest house that night. With a sharp click, Heeju snapped the lipstick cap shut. Leaving the restroom, Heeju walked back toward the memorial hall. Her steps were lighter now, more resolute. In the funeral portrait, Ura was smiling brightly, but Heeju didn't look at it directly. The only thing left for her to do was to bury the memory of that cold, silent room forever. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, as if trying to cover all the filth in the world with a blanket of pure white. The flurries grew thicker, more determined. Heeju smiled quietly and closed the door behind her. And with the sound of the cold winter wind, our story comes to an end.